Cool. Hey everybody, so hello and welcome to this presentation. We're going to talk about metrics today and basically how you can pick better metrics and create better reports. So one of my favorite topics. It's pretty, it's a nerdy one, but I feel very passionately about it. So this is me in black and white, and I am one of those, annoying consultants who kind of comes in and tells you what to do and how to fix everything. But no worries, I also worked in-house doing analytics for about 10 years, so I understand what it's like to be on the flip side of this too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences, both working in-house, being the person generating these reports, and then also how I help clients sort of revamp and make more effective reporting. So my company is BMeasure, and if you have any questions after this, and also I have a Google Analytics class coming up through teaching for a Girl Develop It. It's a women in technology training nonprofit here in DC in August. So if you're interested in coming to a class, it's very low cost with me. Just shoot me an email afterwards, and I will send you that when it gets posted. So cool. All right. So like I said, I have been on both sides of this issue for the past going on 15 years now. So I've been the person in-house making reports, and then also the person helping clients pick better metrics and make more effective reporting. And there's a lot around this issue that I see that kind of needs to get fixed. There's a lot of just picking numbers and throwing them out there. There's a lot of time spent generating reports that no one ever reads, and people complain that, this is not insightful or actionable. So I think it's definitely something in our culture as tech people that we feel like we need to put all of these reports and these dashboards out there, but how do you make this useful and a good use of your time as someone who's generating them? So before I start giving some advice, I kind of want to throw it back to you and ask, who is someone in their organization who is the person who does the monthly or quarterly or maybe even weekly web or digital report? Anybody here? Oh, cool, awesome. And what are some metrics that you include in your report? I'm just kind of curious. Anybody? I know I saw a lot of people. You. What kind of, what do you put in your report?
Sessions, unique page views, and also conversions for search tool on our website, and referral sources.
Oh, cool.
Organic and paid.
And how often does your report go out?
It goes out to a larger group monthly. I look at it daily and weekly to a smaller group.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty good. Anybody else? I'm so quiet. Okay.
Similar to the items you mentioned, but we also look at load time. A lot of our audience is kind of in the low bandwidth areas, so that's something that we're keeping on.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting one. Are they working overseas?
No, it's farmers, so kind of in rural areas of the United States. A lot of them don't have broadband access.
Okay. Yeah, I working on a contract where a lot of the people are in Africa, and that was a big thing that they wanted to report on. Anyone else? We can take one more. I better get to down here in the front row. Yeah. All right. Cool. It's all right that we're shy. Okay. So first, a little bit of a history lesson, just as I think that this provides a lot of context to the general quirkiness of Google Analytics. So Google Analytics was created in 2005, and I graduated from college in 2005, so I like to think that this wasn't a very long time ago. But in the land of the internet, I feel like Google Analytics is kind of a dinosaur, and that it was created in a time where the internet looked a lot different. And I have a couple of screenshots here. So this was YouTube back in 2005. This is crazy. And here's the Washington Post. I'm going to save that one and come back to it because it makes a good point. And then this was Facebook. So you'll notice here that I think a lot of websites, this was a very typical design back in 2005. We got all of these pages here. We had very much like, things were very page heavy, very link heavy. So you'll know that, Google Analytics, when, basically its main thing that it reports very accurately is when somebody loads a page. The page loads, the code of Google Analytics loads, and then you get your page view. So I think, that was emphasized in Google Analytics because when it was created, this was a typical website design, and this is what it was created to be and report most accurately. So even Facebook here, right now it's very much focused on the app, but even Facebook has all of these pages here and all of these pages up here. So it's very, you can see why the way Google Analytics is functioning works very well for a website that was created with 2005 standards. So unfortunately, a lot of the metrics that we like to put in our reports, and I realize a lot of I hear from a lot of people who it's like, oh, my boss tells me that I have to put bounce rate in there, or my boss insists that we need to report page views. So I think a lot of times the higher up management maybe attended, some sort of digital summit circa, 2008 and heard that bounce rates were like the thing that we need to be concerned about. So there's a lot of these metrics that are sort of stuck in the past, and I think a lot of, kind of higher up people in organizations who are kind of insistent on reporting these metrics. And unfortunately, I think that they are misleading, and you want your metrics to reflect your priorities and be a way to measure your success for your website. So if you're reporting things that don't make sense or are inaccurate, it could lead you to make decisions that aren't the best for your organization. So we're going to talk about these three today, and then I gave this presentation to the Drupal meetup here in DC a couple of months ago, and I thought I need to add on an extra section here to sort of back up and figure out how you create a good report in the first place. So we're going to, hopefully we'll have time, and we'll get to that too. And one heads up that a lot of this stuff, and it seems like you all have experience with Google Analytics, but the main thing that I like to emphasize is that a lot of this needs to be set up extra. Like I just showed you that a lot of what comes out of the box with Google Analytics is sort of this 2005 mindset. You get your page views, you get your sessions, you don't get a lot of extras. So a lot of this extra stuff needs to be set up in advance, and then it will start tracking going forward. So unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of Google Analytics tracking, there is no time machine. So you can't go back to January 1st and be able to pull all these stats for this calendar year if they were not set up in advance. And I'll give you a heads up about what needs to be done in advance and what you can get out of your Google Analytics right now, even if you don't have anything set up. All right, so first we're going to tackle page views. And page views, oh man, I have many feelings about most of these metrics, but really page views. Yeah, when I worked in-house, I was sometimes forced to report page views. This is like, so this, I was very excited to find this screenshot. This is an article from 2019, but I think it's very much in that 2005 to 2010 web design mindset. So basically, every time you click this arrow, it loads a new page. So if, for example, you are the person who wrote this article, and you go to your web analyst and you tell them, hey, I want to know on average, how far do people get through these 91 photos? Did anybody see all 91 of them? Well, it would be easy enough for the web analyst to pull that data looking at page views, because every photo is a different page. The thing is that most websites are not designed like this now. This is an image of a web project that I worked on with a government client up in New York City, from New York State, and I think this is much more of a typical design. So in this case, when you pull page views, you can see by looking at the 91 different page views how far people got in the article, what they read. In this case, by looking at page views, you can't really see anything at all. This is all one page, and it has a lot of different content on it. It has, I can't even see this now, but there's a sign up and a video and personal stories. This is all about flood zones and flood insurance in New York City. So basically, if you look at this page, all you can see is, okay, someone viewed this page, but what you really want to know as a content person is, well, did they read those stories? Did they watch that video? Did they even scroll to the bottom, or did they just click on this button and not read anything else? We can't see that by just looking at page views. And I think this is my main gripe with page views, is that ultimately, if you have a boss who is very concerned about page views, and I see this all the time, so I know it still happens, if you change your website redesign from a design that looks like this, where you have lots of pages, and every time someone clicks on an article, it loads a new article, or maybe an article is 3 pages long, and then you hire a web company and you redesign the website, and now your website looks like this, which is a very modern, common, nice, mobile, accessible site. Your page views are going to drop. We went from 91 pages to 1 page. So when you apply this across the whole site, you might see page views decline, 50%. It depends how you redesign your website. So you get these panic calls oh my God, in last year versus this year, our web traffic is down 50%. Your traffic is not down, your page views are down because you redesigned your site. So I think emphasizing page views as a metric is a major mistake, because it's going to penalize you if you, maybe remove some content or rejigger your content or move to more of this infinite scroll design, because you're ultimately reducing the number of page views. So what I recommend instead is, no more page views. Page views, I think, are good if you are maybe reporting to, you have writers for your blog, content writers, and you want to tell them about their most popular posts. That could be a good use of page views. But ultimately, I think you want to move towards sessions and events. It sounds like some people have this set up, but I think sessions are your best way to measure website traffic. Like I said, page views are misleading, and I think unique users or users visits. Sessions was previously called visits, so if you anyway, okay. So I think kind of focusing on unique users also can be confusing, because we use our laptops and our phones and that sort of thing. So sessions is the one I always recommend. So what do I mean when I say events? An event isn't Google Analytics word for basically anything. Who here has events set up on their site? Before I go into great detail. Okay, got about a half, a third. So we're not going to go into how to set these up exactly. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them. But basically, you can Google it later. It's the way, the feature you use in Google Analytics to track actions on your site that are not page views. So this is definitely an area where you can't get a time machine. So if you have a new initiative that launched in March, and you want to do some 6-month reporting on it, and you go in October and you try and pull your data about who signed up for this thing or watched this video, if you didn't set up event tracking ahead of time, you won't be able to get that data. So before you launch something, it's definitely something you need to think through and take care of in advance. So I already kind of covered this. I got ahead of myself. But yeah, I think if you are just under pressure from somebody higher up and you just need to report on website traffic, the metric I recommend is sessions. Cool. Any questions? Good. Cool. All right, next up, direct traffic. This is another misunderstood one. So I think floating out there in the world is this idea that direct traffic is when somebody types your website URL into the browser and then hits, enter, and goes to your site. Or maybe it's when they bookmark this thing and go to your site. All right. So there's this idea that like website traffic, that's great traffic, right? Because it's all from people who just like memorized our URL because they love us so much. That is totally misleading. And I'm like, my personal passion to get out there and tell people that direct traffic is not people who are passionate about your site and have memorized it. It's actually mystery traffic. And as a web analyst, it's actually kind of the bane of my existence because I help people understand all their referral sources. A lot of times it's based on their marketing or their communications outreach. And like this analysis I did for a client, it's just like this big black box, this direct traffic. Like we know how many people came from all of these other different types of ads, but I have no idea what this direct traffic even means. It's basically when Google does not get referrer information from a source, so we just don't know what it is. It can be bookmarks and typing things into the browser bar, like I just said, but it also can be all of these other things. A lot of times it's people texting links or chatting links or links in PDFs. It can be actually a problem with your HTTPS. So it's basically when we just don't know. I'm going to talk a little bit about, so I would say there's kind of no way to get out of reporting direct traffic. Ultimately, you will have some because people are coming directly to your website. The idea here is to minimize direct traffic. And how you do that is by using UTM parameters. So this is one of these things that has 9 million names. So you might see them called UTM parameters or campaign tracking, campaign tags, or some sort of variation thereof. And just talk very quickly about how this works. So the idea here is we want to make sure that direct traffic is properly attributed to its referral source. So yeah, like I said, we'll never get rid of it entirely, but you want to make sure that you're not running, some sort of campaign and you're not getting credit for it. Because if you're the person in the communications department, you want to make sure that when you're reporting out that we got this much traffic from social or this much traffic from email or whatever, that you're getting credit for that. I don't think it's a slide in here, so I have to bring this up. So one of the main places that I see direct traffic misreported is for email. So if you do this anywhere, and I realize this is a big pain, make sure you use these campaign tags for any emails, or tell your email or your communications person to be sure to use these, because most email providers don't send that referral information to Google, and it gets attributed as direct traffic. So it will often look, and I see this a lot with clients, that it's like, we're not getting any traffic from email, but we send out emails twice a month. Where's it all going? It's because Google doesn't know that it's an email. And this is the way you tell Google that traffic is from email. So basically, this is just a sample. And if you Google campaign parameters, something along those lines, you will get a page on Google's site it's a little form where you can make these. So it's super easy. The thing is, the challenge with this is doing it consistently, because it is kind of annoying. So basically all you do here is, for your source, this is what I always tell people, though honestly you could get creative and do something else if you wanted. Source will be specific outlet. So if we're doing email here, maybe it's newsletter 1, because you have 2 different newsletters for 2 different audiences. And your medium is email, because that's your type of communications. And then your campaign will be, if you have a certain initiative going on, you can name it with the campaign. It kind of depends on what's going on in your thing. So I do webinars. I did this as a webinar. So my source was wherever I promoted the webinar. So I posted on this news list called Progressive Exchange. So my source was Progressive Exchange, my medium was email, and my campaign was reporting webinar. Cool. So now, every time somebody clicks on one of those links, it gets sent to Google Analytics, and I can find it here under Acquisition, then Campaigns, All Campaigns, and so here is all of my traffic. I got a decent amount of people. All of my traffic from those links I tagged and put out in email. And if I hadn't tagged them, they would all show up as direct, because these are all personal emails to people's Gmail and stuff, and those don't track. So this is really useful for me to know. And honestly, I have actually used this. I'm a bit of is like cobbler's child or have no shoes sort of person, where it's like I spend all this time telling people how to track everything and then don't do it. But actually, I have used this. I have found that these two top things are the best places for me to promote things, and I know that because I've been tagging my emails. So when I'm pressed for time, I just put things there and don't put them other places. Okay, so overall, that's the sort of insight that you can get. But I think it's also important when you're trying to make a case for the digital team and the communications team, you want to make sure that your traffic is getting attributed to the right source, so we can say, hey, look at this great work we're doing with email. We should fire our email person, because actually they're sending us a lot of visitors who are very engaged. All right, and my last personal bane of existence is bounce rate. So what is a bounce rate? I feel like there's a quiz here. Anybody? Bounce rates? Tell me. So, yeah, okay. That's awesome. I do a lot of training and I ask people, and I have gotten all sorts of different things about what a bounce rate is. And I think it is so confusing because, first of all, lower is better, which is just inherently counterintuitive. But there's a lot of ideas about like, oh, well, it's somebody who didn't like your website and then left. But it's very much somebody who visited only one page and then left, right? So Google actually doesn't even know much about them because they don't have that next interaction with the website. Actually, I think we're going to talk about that next. All right, so web bounce rate, like page views, I think is another one where if we focus too much on this, we might be focusing on the wrong thing. I think a lot of sites now, they have a lot of content. Probably you all have a lot of content on your site, a lot of articles and information that people need for a specific aspect of their life. They might search in Google, come to your site, read that information, and then leave, right? So they only visited one page. But was that a bad experience? For them, probably not. Like, they probably think that's great because they didn't have to hunt around your website. They found what they wanted right away. They read it, they got their information, and then they left again. So if we focus too much on the bounce rate, we're basically saying that that's a bad experience. Depending on your site and your organization, it might be a bad experience. Kind of depends. But if you're an organization where you're just trying to provide information and you want to make sure it's easy and accessible and people find it quickly, then maybe bounce rate is not a bad thing. Like maybe you want a high bounce rate, or maybe you just want to not stress about whether it's high or not. So I think it can be very misleading because I think people equate it to a happy user, but I don't think that's I think that's a false comparison. So I know you said you were tracking conversions. So I think where you want to go with this instead is to track conversions on your site. So conversions is another Google Analytics term that is confusing, kind of like an event. And basically, it's a goal for your site. The Google Analytics term is goal and conversion. Conversion is more the marketing term. So those two things are the same. So it depends kind of what world you come from. So a conversion is a goal. Basically, it's what do you want users to do on your site. So it's going to be different for everybody. An event, I said, is any action on the site that's not a page view. So you can take an event and you can make it a goal, or you can take a page view and make it a goal. Thing is that this is basically focused on what's your end outcome that you want. You want people to join your email list, you want them to, apply for some sort of program, download some information. really depends. So this is going to be a decision that you might have to discuss with your team. Hopefully it's something that came up while you were designing your website, because ultimately you want to drive people to these actions. So these are just some screenshots of various conversions that I have set up. But it really depends. Cool. All right, and then here is back again a look at Google Analytics. So it's really nice to configure these in Google Analytics because, oh, look at here, we got our source and medium, our campaign traffic. Now I can see, okay, out of all those people who came from the emails, who actually signed up for the webinar? So this is ultimately what I want. It will also configure for you the percentage, which is pretty nice. So it's like, oh, I got 40% of people who came from this email list. Like, that's pretty good. They must be my target audience. This is a small scale, but if you're doing a lot of different communications work and you're really comparing and contrasting, you don't have enough time to do absolutely everything or all social media or whatever, this is a great way to get insight into what is actually working. Out of everywhere we're putting something, which platforms are actually getting people to come to our site and apply for this program. Cool. All right. And I know that the main caveat here that everyone raises is like, well, that's great, but a lot of times we don't have a goal. Like, we're just spreading information about a certain topic or program. We just want people to come to our site and read our content and know that we exist and have information that's useful in their lives. So here is the solution that I propose for that. So in this, okay, people are coming to our site and they're reading our content. I think the next question you have here is, why can't we just use time on site? That will show, or time on page. That will show whether they're coming and they're reading the whole blog post because, they spent 5 minutes with it. Well, time on site and time on page are another misleading Google Analytics thing. Like I said before, if someone comes to your website and they don't take another action, so like viewing another page, or perhaps if you have events set up, doing another event like playing a video, Google doesn't know how much time they spent on your website. So it will just put it to 0. And when you're looking at time on site or time on page, you're looking at numbers that are only for people who visited 2 or more pages. So if you have a high bounce rate and you have a lot of people who are doing that sideways thing where they're coming in and just viewing one page, that's 50% of your traffic. When you calculate your time on site, you're only looking at the 50% of people who viewed 2 or more pages. So you can see why this is misleading. And you want to make sure that it's accurate if this is how you're determining your whole content strategy. All right, that's a little complicated, but ask me if it's not clear. I can try to explain it again. So what I typically do for clients is I use some tracking in Google Tag Manager to measure when somebody scrolls to a certain percentage on the page, like say 75%, and they spend, say, a minute with the content, I count that as a read. So I know it's still a proxy, but I think it's a good way to at least be accurate in, are people really at least interacting with your content and getting, spending a certain amount of time with it and getting to a certain place on the page. And it's also accurate. It's not based just on a certain percentage of your users. All right, so those are the 4 things that I think you should stop reporting on. I mean, honestly, you can't really totally eliminate page views and direct traffic, but I think you definitely, when you create these reports, take a hard look at the metrics and think is this really tracking and measuring what we ultimately want the outcome to be? If you're reporting page views, what you're often saying is, are people interested in our content? Is it popular? Are they consuming it? And depending on how your design's set up, page views, direct traffic, bounce rate, those might not be the best metrics that you should report. You shouldn't just choose them because they're popular. So I want to leave time for questions, but I have maybe 5 more minutes here. I wanted to add this section on to kind of address that same thing. That, you know, it's great to have metrics. It's great to pick things that are accurate and important, but it's also important to kind of take a step back and make sure that the information that you're providing to your organization is actually answering the questions that they have. So, like I said, when I worked in-house, this is actually a story about the Better Business Bureau, which is not a government organization, but in some ways it's very similar. So I worked in the national office, and when I started, I inherited their monthly Google Analytics reports. And when I started, it was maybe like 20 slides long, and I would send it out to the whole organization, so all the local offices. And I was constantly getting requests from them, from the local BBBs, like, hey, it's cool that you provide top pages. Can you provide top pages for search traffic? You know, so there was always more requests for more information. And as I worked there, this report just got longer and longer. And like at some point, it would take me, you know, like several days each month to put it together. So I decided to solve this problem by sending out a survey to all of the people who got the report and ask them, what do you find most important? Is the report too long? And what would you cut? And so I got this response back, and I should have known this would happen, that yes, it's too long, but we don't want you to cut anything. So I think this is a very, very typical experience, and I find this now working with clients. If I tell them, hey, do you want A, B, and C? It's always, we want all of the above. Like, no, people will never just pick one. So my strategy to deal with this issue, which probably you all have had to, is to kind of, before we even get into picking metrics, is to kind of back up and have a bigger level conversation. And I realize, saying this as an outside person, like, it's easy to come in and me as a consultant and say, oh, well, we can't put that in the report. And it's harder to push back when it's your boss. Or my favorite technique is like, yeah, we can do another report about that, another dashboard, you know, but that's going to be extra hours. So, you know, that makes people focus a lot more if they know that they're going to it's out of scope and they're going to have to pay more. If you're on salary, I know that that's harder to do. But here's my technique. So every time I get a dashboard or report creation project, I make sure I get answer to these 2 questions: the who is your audience, and when they look at this dashboard, what do you want them to take away from it? I think this really helps define exactly how this is going to be used and what information goes on the dashboard. So the who is your audience helps me decide how granular should this data be. So, I mean, pretty much, you know, if your audience is everybody in the organization, like, this dashboard does not need to be super detailed and contain, you know, every single search term that's driving traffic to your website or something like that. You know, people just want to have, if it's everyone in your organization, you know, we can keep it very high level. If it's just, you know, high up leadership, keep it very high level. But sometimes I get requests for dashboards that have specific uses. There's some on the next slide. And in that case, we want to go more granular. So I think this helps you make that decision. And then the what do you want to take away from this dashboard, that helps you decide what metrics to put on it. Like, okay, we want to know, basically a lot of times I get like, we want to send this out and we want people to take away that the website is great, it's a great tool of communication. So, you know, in that case, you just, you know, you want to showcase how well things are going. It's going to be different than if you're using this with a specific team to make more critical decisions. And here's some, there's a lot of text. I hate to put too much text on things, but these are some different dashboard projects that I've worked on. I thought this worked well as an example for what works well as a dashboard or a report. And when I say that, I mean something that's standardized. So I use Google Data Studio to build dashboards. I mean, certainly a lot of people use Tableau or other products, but it's something that's standardized every month. So it runs and you get the same metrics. And so you want something that's automated and the same over time. So these are things I think that work well as kind of dashboards or standardized reporting. Something, I once created a dashboard for, it was what people are clicking on the home page. And this was at PBS, used to work there, and they would have a meeting every morning, pull up the dashboard, and you could see what performed well the previous day, and they talk about priorities for the next day, of what they should feature on the homepage for different shows and that sort of thing. So it has a very specific use case, and the dashboard doesn't change. It has it provides the same data, and they're able to use it in this specific way. So I think either something that is used with a team to make strategic decisions about their content or maybe their marketing communications efforts, that's good. I think also something that's standardized that you can send out to your organization, so you're not like me back at the Better Business Bureau, spending a week every month creating this elaborate report. I think that is also a good use for a dashboard. But I have found, and I was just talking to another analyst friend about this yesterday, is that I think a lot of people, they use bounce rate as shorthand for, do people like our website content? They also use dashboard or report as shorthand for, we have this data and we don't understand what to do with it, we don't understand what it means, so we need to make a dashboard. And I think the big thing you want to figure out is, do they want a dashboard or a report, which is ultimately the same information tracked over time, or do they want an analysis? So when you're taking a step back and you're talking to your team and you want to know what types of problems or information they need, if you hear questions like this is an analysis question. No dashboard in the world, no matter how much time you spend campaign tagging, your email links, and how accurate your metrics are going to answer these questions, because they're just questions that require a human to dig into the data and understand the organization and kind of provide their insights. So these questions about strategy, like why is our traffic down after we relaunch this website, and how can we fix that, or how can we make our homepage better or our content more engaging? We can track, like I said, reads of pages over time, and you can see which pages get the most reads. But ultimately, if you want to look at a year's worth of data and really dig into where people are coming from and who's staying longest and who has the highest conversion rates and blah, 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 that takes a human being, and that's an analysis project. Unfortunately, we are not at the point where you can magically make a dashboard that will accompany that. So we're at the beginning of this presentation. We had no time machine. Unfortunately, we have no magical spell to make your dashboards and reports just magically provide insights. So I think that this is a part where, I can't, it doesn't matter how great your metrics are and how standardized your reporting is. Ultimately, you have to have that conversation in your organization to say, this is the information we need to make a decision about our strategy, and then that requires actual analysis and diving into the data. I think dashboards are good if you need to track progress against something over time, or you need a way to kind of easily showcase your data, for a particular off-team need. So, we got 5-10 minutes for questions. I know we got a quiet group here, but if anybody has, any stories or they have any questions and thought my opinion about anything, happy to provide it.
Can you, for time on page, is there any way to filter out 0? So you can see time on page greater than 0?
So it will only calculate time. The time on page will only include the people who.
Okay, so that's you're saying 0 is excluded from that number. 0 isn't pulling down my time on page.
So if you have a very small set of people or a set of pages, and you're looking at them and you see that some are 0, it's because. So okay, say you have new blog post, and it's on the blog and it has 5 people visited it, and you pull it up and you see time on page is 0. How can that be? How 5 people only spent 0 seconds on this page? It's because all 5 of those were bounces, and so Google doesn't know there was no second timestamp. Google doesn't know how much time they spent on the page. But if you look at the average time on page for a page that has a lot of traffic, you won't have that. You'll just see the average of people who visited the second page.
So to clarify about people actually reading the content, so you said to use Google Tag Manager to capture scrolling, but then you pair that with time on page, or what do you pair that with? There was a clock there.
Oh, yeah. So it's scrolling, and there's some, if you Google, there's free code available online that does engagement counters. So basically they do what time on page is supposed to be doing. And when your visit starts, it starts counting how long you've spent on the page. So I set up some rules in Tag Manager, kind of depending on how long the content is, that when it gets to a minute or 2 minutes, that another event will fire to say that people spent this much time.
And you call that one?
Engagement timer is generally how it's called. So, yeah, if you look for Google Tag Manager engagement timer, you should find some.
We have like marketing people, they'll do their digital campaigns with a marketing company, the marketing company will come back with these high numbers, like, oh, these many people clicked on, but when they come to me and say how many people actually visit the page with Google Analytics, the number will be considerably lower. So I try to explain to them, the marketing company's hitting, just people, they hit the click, but that doesn't necessarily mean they loaded the page, because Google's not going to capture people that went there but then left before the page fully loaded. Are there other reasons on why a number could be so low? That's pretty much my main reason on why this discrepancy of, well, all these people click the actual ad, but this many people actually Google's capturing from the campaign, from that link, that campaign link.
Yeah, I found an article about this that provides a really, I can send it to you later. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's that it should be within about 20%, and if it's not, then you might have a problem with your with tracking in some manner. But yeah, there's definitely, the code doesn't load all the way. It might be bots. That's gonna be another thing. Those are maybe the two big ones. But yeah, some blog online did an experiment, and they ran looked in Google and Facebook and I think it was Facebook ads specifically, and tried to figure out what's the standard difference that you should expect, and I believe it was about 20%. And if it's
That's good to know.
So adding the UTM tags doesn't automatically remove those links from the listing, from the direct listing. It doesn't automatically move them over to to the social listing. It doesn't remove them from the direct listing in any way. Those are very separate areas of Google Analytics report, right?
Well, it will show up when you look in your referral report. Instead of showing up as direct, it will show up as email or social, or whatever you choose. Just do it automatically. The actual URLs, Google knows when you put the parameters on the end that it should just strip them off automatically, and it'll just show up like a normal page in Google Analytics. You won't be able to see all that extra data at the end.
So it's adding it as the source, so whatever your source, that's what it'll that's what it'll count it as instead of direct.
Yeah, so whatever you put in here as the source, that will show up as your source in your report. So, like on this slide, the source is now whatever I put, and the medium is now email. And if I hadn't used those links, well, actually it wouldn't even be here, but if I looked under the, all traffic acquisition, it would just be direct. It would just be lumped in with the rest of the direct traffic.
It's still lumped in with direct.
No, it moves out of direct into, well, it doesn't really move because it never went in there. So it's just.
When looking at referrals in social media specifically, is there a way to track whether it's coming from your social media channels or if somebody took your link and shared on their Google Analytics? Can you break it down that far? I know when you click, say, from Facebook, it amends the tracking rate. I don't see that in Google Analytics. Is there a way?
Yeah, so When I worked at PBS, we worked on this. So we did do campaign tagging for, we were supposed to, for everything we put out on social, and I created a special medium that was just like social marketing or something. Then if people put their own, if they just found a story or show online and they put it out, it wouldn't be tagged with that referral source. It would just show up as the generic social that Google automatically tags. So that was one way about it. If you put something out and then someone else reshares it, I don't think, if you post something and somebody else comes and posts whatever it is to their page, I don't think you would know. But there's a lot of products now, that was a couple years ago, that help with this social tracking. So you might be able to explore an automated solution, but that was my more manual solution.
At DrupalCon earlier this year, in a discussion among a bunch of government folks, there was somebody brought up that some agencies are looking at moving away from Google Analytics for security concerns. And I was kind of curious to get your take on that, if you're hearing that from clients as well.
There's certainly people are more interested in privacy. I feel like in the world where between Facebook and Google, I feel more okay giving my data to Google than Facebook. I have mixed feelings about this because it's this is my job and I work in this role, and I feel like I can't be oh, I don't want to be tracked because I track other people. But like you said, there's a lot that people can do with your data, and a lot of it out there, and I think there's not a big awareness around how much people are tracking. But I haven't seen a big movement away from Google Analytics. I'm sure because I work, government and nonprofits, it's a price thing. This is free compared to other solutions, which are, tens of thousands of dollars a year. All right. Anybody else? Oh,
I was wondering about Google Data Studio.
Yeah. So I say Google's free version of Tableau, and like all things Google, it works really well with other Google products like Google Analytics and AdWords and the Search Console. If you want to import data from other sources, that's where it becomes a little more difficult. But it's pretty nice, and much nicer than the dashboards that are in Google Analytics, if you've ever used those. Okay.
It seems like Data Studio is partnering. Every time I log in there, there's more of these third-party affiliations, something like we might be talking about. I don't necessarily so maybe there's a problem. In other words, if your account problems with another third-party
Yeah.
Data Studio program.
So I would say the big issue is, especially with the social media platforms, you get what data they provide you. So if Twitter decides to change its API and it's well, now we're only providing, the best month of data or whatever, you're just kind of at their whim. So even if the connector works well, you might not be able to get the information that you want out of there. The other thing is that, when you're pooling, it's hard, you can't, I'm sure it's possible some way. It's hard to combine data sources into a single dashboard. If you want to change your dashboard, filters and things if you're pulling in different data sources, that doesn't necessarily work very smoothly. So it can be hard if you're putting a lot of different sources in one report or dashboard. They've improved that though, so it's better, but still not really there. All right, let's see. I think we're at time, so if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to come up. We can chat for a little bit, but I know there's probably someone else coming in here. Thanks.